Emperor Meiji, or Meiji the Great, was the 122nd emperor of Japan according to the traditional order of succession, reigning from February 3, 1867 until his death on July 30, 1912. He presided over a time of rapid change in the Empire of Japan, as the nation quickly changed from a feudal state to a capitalist and imperial world power, characterized by the Japanese Industrial Revolution. At the time of Meiji's birth in 1852, Japan was an isolated, pre-industrial, feudal country dominated by the Tokugawa shogunate and the daimyo, who ruled over the country's more than 250 decentralized domains. By the time of his death in 1912, Japan had undergone a political, social, and industrial revolution at home and emerged as one of the great powers on the world stage. The New York Times summed up this transformation at his funeral in 1912 with the words, "The contrast between that which preceded the funeral car and that which followed it was striking indeed. Before it went Old Japan, after it came New Japan. In Japan, the reigning emperor is always referred to as the emperor. Since the modern era, a deceased emperor is referred to by a posthumous name, which is the name of the era coinciding with the emperor's reign. Having ruled during the Meiji period, the emperor is thus posthumously known as the Meiji Emperor, or simply Emperor Meiji. His personal name, which is not used in any formal or official context, was Mutsuhito. Background: the Tokugawa shogunate had established itself in the early 17th century. Under its rule, the shogun governed Japan. About 180 lords, known as daimyo, ruled autonomous realms under the shogun, who were occasionally called upon the daimyo for gifts, but did not tax them. The shogun controlled the daimyo in other ways. Only the shogun could approve the marriages, and the shogun could divest a daimyo of his lands. In 1615, the first Tokugawa shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who had officially retired from his position, and his son Tokugawa Hidetada, the titular shogun, issued a code of behavior for the nobility. Under it, the emperor was required to devote his time to scholarship and the arts. The emperors under the shogunate appear to have closely adhered to this code, studying Confucian classics and devoting time to poetry and calligraphy. They were only taught the rudiments of Japanese and Chinese history and geography. The shogun did not seek the consent or advice of the emperor for his actions. Emperors almost never left the palace compound, or gosho in Kyoto, except after an emperor retired to take shelter in or temple if the palace caught on fire. Few emperors lived long enough to retire. Of the Meiji emperor's 5 predecessors, only his grandfather lived into his 40s, dying aged 46. The imperial family suffered very high rates of infant mortality. All 5 of the emperor's brothers and sisters died as infants, and only 5 of his own 15 children reached adulthood. Soon after taking control in the early 17th century, shogunate officials ended much Western trade with Japan, and barred missionaries from the islands. In addition to the substantial Chinese trade, only the Dutch continued trade with Japan, maintaining a post on the island of Dejima by Nagasaki. However, by the early 19th century, European and American vessels appeared in the waters around Japan with increasing frequency. Boyhood. Prince Mutsuhito was born on November 3, 1852, in a small house on his maternal grandfather's property at the north end of the Gosho. At the time, a birth was believed to be polluting, so imperial princes were not born in the palace, but usually in a structure, often temporary, near the pregnant woman's father's house. The boy's mother, Nakayama Yoshiko, was a concubine to his father Emperor Komei, and was the daughter of the acting major counselor, Nakayama Tadayasu. The young prince was given the name Sashinomiya, or Prince Sachi. The young prince was born at a time of change for Japan. This change was symbolized dramatically when Commodore Matthew Perry and his squadron of what their Japanese dubbed the Black Ships sailed into the harbor at Edo in July 1853. Perry sought to open Japan to trade, and warned the Japanese of military consequences if they did not agree. During the crisis brought on by Perry's arrival, the shogunate took, for the first time in at least 250 years, the highly unusual step of consulting with the imperial court, and Emperor Komei's officials advised that they felt the Americans should be allowed to trade and asked that they be informed in advance of any steps to be taken upon Perry's return. Feeling that it could not win a war, the Japanese government allowed trade and submitted to what it dubbed the unequal treaties, giving up tariff authority and the right to try foreigners in its own courts. The shogunate's willingness to consult with the court was short-lived. In 1858, word of a treaty arrived with a letter stating that due to shortness of time, it had not been possible to consult. Emperor Komei was so incensed that he threatened to abdicate, though even this action would have required the consent of the shogun. Much of the emperor's boyhood is known only through later accounts, which his biographer Donald Keene points out are often contradictory. One contemporary described Mutsuhito as healthy and strong, somewhat of a bully, and exceptionally talented at sumo. Another states that the prince was delicate and often ill. Some biographers state that he fainted when he first heard gunfire, while others deny this account. On August 16, 1860, Sashinomiya was proclaimed Prince of the Blood and heir to the throne, and was formally adopted by his father's consort. Later that year, on November 11, he was proclaimed as the crown prince and given an adult name, Mutsuhito. The prince began his education at the age of 7. He proved an indifferent student, and later in life wrote poems regretting that he had not applied himself more in writing practice. Unrest and Accession. By the early 1860s, the shogunate was under several threats. Representatives of foreign powers sought to increase their influence in Japan. Many daimyo were increasingly dissatisfied with bakufu handling foreign affairs. Large numbers of young samurai, known as shishi or men of high purpose, began to meet and speak against the shogunate. The shishi revered the Emperor Komei and favored direct violent action to cure societal ills. While they initially desired the death or expulsion of all foreigners, the shishi would later begin to advocate the modernization of the country. The bakufu enacted several measures to appease the various groups, and hoped to drive a wedge between the shishi and daimyo. Kyoto was a major center for the shishi, who had influence over the Emperor Komei. In 1863, they persuaded him to issue an order to expel barbarians. The order placed the shogunate in a difficult position, since it knew it lacked the power to carry it out. Several attacks were made on foreigners of the ships, and foreign forces retaliated. Bakufu forces were able to drive most of the shishi out of Kyoto, and an attempt by them to return in 1864 was driven back. Nevertheless, unrest continued throughout Japan. The prince's awareness of the political turmoil is uncertain. During this time, he studied waka poetry, first with his father, then with the court poets. As the prince continued his classical education in 1866, a new shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, took office. A reformer who desired to transform Japan into a Western-style state. Yoshinobu, who would prove to be the final shogun, met with resistance from among the bakufu, even as unrest and military actions continued. In mid-1866, a bakufu army set forth to punish rebels in southern Japan. The army was defeated. The Emperor Komei had always enjoyed excellent health, and was only 36 years old in January 1867. In that month, however, he fell seriously ill. Though he appeared to make some recovery, he suddenly worsened and died on January 30th. Many historians believe the Emperor Kome was poisoned, a view not unknown at the time. British diplomat Sir Ernest Satow wrote, "It is impossible to deny that disappearance from the political scene, leaving as his successor a boy of 15 or 16, was most opportune." The Crown Prince formally ascended to the throne on February 3, 1867, in a brief ceremony in Kyoto. The new emperor continued his classical education, which did not include matters of politics. In the meantime, the shogun, Yoshinobu, struggled to maintain power. He repeatedly asked for the emperor's confirmation of his actions, which he eventually received, but there is no indication that the young emperor was himself involved in the decisions. The Shishi and other rebels continued to shape the vision of the new Japan, and while they revered the emperor, they had no thought of having him play an active part in the political process. The political struggle reached its climax in late 1867. An agreement was reached by which Yoshinobu would maintain his title and some of his power, but the lawmaking power would be vested in a bicameral legislature based on the British model. However, the agreement fell apart, and on November 9, 1867, Yoshinobu officially tendered his resignation to the emperor, formally stepping down 10 days later. The following month, the rebels marched on Kyoto, taking control of the imperial palace. On January 4, 1868, the emperor ceremoniously read out a document before the court proclaiming the restoration of imperial rule, and the following month, documents were sent to foreign powers. The Emperor of Japan announces to the sovereigns of all foreign countries and to the subjects that permission has been granted to the shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, to return the governing power in accordance with his own request. "We shall henceforward exercise supreme authority in all the internal and external affairs of the country. Consequently, the title of emperor must be substituted for that of tycoon, in which the treaties have been made. Officers are being appointed by us to the conduct of foreign affairs. It is desirable that the representatives of the treaty powers recognize this announcement." Matsuhito Yoshinobu resisted only briefly, but it was not until late 1869 that the final Bakufu holdouts were finally defeated. In the 9th month of the following year, the era was changed to Meiji, or Enlightened rule, which was later used for the emperor's posthumous name. This marked the beginning of the custom of an era coinciding with an emperor's reign, and posthumously naming the emperor after the era during which he ruled. Soon after his accession, the emperor's officials presented Ichija Haruko to him as a possible bride. The future empress was the daughter of an imperial official, and was 3 years older than the groom, who would have to wait to wed until after his Gembuku. The two married on January 11, 1869. Known posthumously as Empress Shokan, she was the first imperial consort to receive the title of Kogo in several hundred years. Although she was the first Japanese empress consort to play a public role, she bore no children. However, the Meiji emperor had 15 children by 5 official ladies-in-waiting. Only 5 of his children, a prince born to Lady Naruko, the daughter of Yanagiwara Mitsunaru, and 4 princesses born to Lady Sachiko, the eldest daughter of Count Sono Motosechi, lived to adulthood. They were Crown Prince Yoshihito, 3rd son; Princess Masako, 6th daughter; Princess Fusiko, 7th daughter; Princess Nobuko, 8th daughter; Princess Toshiko, 9th daughter. Meiji era. consolidation of power. Despite the ouster of the Bakufu, no effective central government had been put in place by the rebels. On March 23, foreign envoys were first permitted to visit Kyoto and pay formal calls on the emperor. On April 7, 1868, the emperor was presented with the Charter Oath, a 5-point statement of the nature of the new government, designed to win over those who had not yet committed themselves to the new regime. This document, which the emperor then formally promulgated, abolished feudalism and proclaimed a modern democratic government for Japan. The Charter Oath would later be cited by Emperor Hirohito in the Humanity Declaration as support for the imposed changes in Japanese government. Following World War II, in mid-May, he left the imperial precincts in Kyoto for the first time since early childhood to take command of the forces pursuing the remnants of the Bakufu armies. Traveling in slow stages, he took 3 days to travel from Kyoto to Osaka, through roads lined with crowds. There was no conflict in Osaka. The new leaders wanted the emperor to be more visible to his people and to foreign envoys. At the end of May, after 2 weeks in Osaka, the emperor returned to his home. Shortly after his return, it was announced that the emperor would begin to preside over all state business, reserving further literary study for his leisure time. Only from 1871 did the emperor's studies include materials on contemporary affairs. On September 19, 1868, the emperor announced that the name of the city of Edo was being changed to Tokyo, or Eastern Capital. He was formally crowned in Kyoto on October 15. Shortly before the coronation, he announced that the new era, or Nenga, would be called Meiji, or Enlightened Rule. Heretofore the Nenga had often been changed multiple times in an emperor's reign. From now on, it was announced, there would only be one Nengo per reign. Soon after his coronation, the emperor journeyed to Tokyo by road, visiting it for the first time. He arrived in late November, and began an extended stay by distributing sake among the population. The population of Tokyo was eager for an imperial visit. It had been the site of the shogun's court, and the population feared that with the abolition of the shogunate, the city might fall into decline. It would not be until 1889 that a final decision was made to move the capital to Tokyo. While in Tokyo, the emperor boarded a Japanese naval vessel for the first time, and the following day gave instructions for studies to see how Japan's navy could be strengthened. Soon after his return to Kyoto, a rescript was issued in the emperor's name. It indicated his intent to be involved in government affairs, and indeed he attended cabinet meetings and innumerable other government functions, though rarely speaking, almost until the day of his death. Political reform. The successful revolutionaries organized themselves into a council of state, and subsequently into a system where 3 main ministers led the government. This structure would last until the establishment of a prime minister, who would lead a cabinet in the Western fashion, in 1885. Initially, not even the retention of the emperor was certain. Revolutionary leader Goto Shojiro later stated that some officials were afraid the extremists might go further and abolish the Mikado. Japan's new leaders sought to reform the patchwork system of domains governed by the daimyo. In 1869, several of the daimyo who had supported the revolution gave the lands to the emperor and were reappointed as governors, with considerable salaries. By the following year, all other daimyo had followed suit. In 1871, the emperor announced that domains were entirely abolished, as Japan was organized into 72 prefectures. The daimyo were compensated with annual salaries equal to 10% of the former revenues, but were required to move to the new capital, Tokyo. Most retired from politics. The new administration gradually abolished most privileges of the samurai, including the right to a stipend from the government. However, unlike the daimyo, many samurai suffered financially from this change. Most other class-based distinctions were abolished. Legalized discrimination against the burakuman ended. However, these classes continue to suffer discrimination in Japan to the present time. Although a parliament was formed, it had no real power, and neither did the emperor. Power had passed from the Tokugawa into the hands of those daimyo and other samurai who had led the restoration. Japan was thus controlled by the genro, an oligarchy, which comprised the most powerful men of the military, political, and economic spheres. The emperor, if nothing else, showed greater political longevity than his recent predecessors, as he was the first Japanese monarch to remain on the throne past the age of 50 since the abdication of Emperor Ogimachi in 1586. The Japanese take pride in the Meiji Restoration, as it and the accompanying industrialization allowed Japan to become the preeminent power in the Pacific and a major player in the world within a generation. Yet the Meiji Emperor's role in the restoration remains debatable. He certainly did not control Japan, but how much influence he wielded is unknown. It is unlikely it will ever be clear whether he supported the Sino-Japanese War or the Russo-Japanese War. One of the few windows we have into the emperor's own feelings is his poetry, which seems to indicate a pacifist streak, or at least a man who wished war to be avoided. He composed the following pacifist poem in waka form. Yomo no umi mina hakara tuomo fu yo ni nado namikaze no tachisa waguramu. The cease of the four directions. All are born of one womb. Why, then, do the wind and waves rise in discord? This poem was later recited by his grandson, Emperor Showa, in an imperial conference in September 1941, indirectly showing his own anti-war sentiment. Near the end of his life, several anarchists, including Kotoku Shusui, were executed on charges of having conspired to murder the sovereign. This conspiracy was known as the High Treason Incident. Death. The Meiji Emperor, suffering from diabetes, nephritis, and gastroenteritis, died of uremia. Although the official announcement said he died at 0:42 on July 30, 1912, the actual death was at 22:40 on July 29. After the emperor's death in 1912, the Japanese Diet passed a resolution to commemorate his role in the Meiji Restoration. An iris garden in an area of Tokyo where the Meiji emperor and empress had been known to visit was chosen as the building's location for the Shinto shrine Meiji Jingu. The shrine does not contain the emperor's grave, which is located at Fushimi Momoyama south of Kyoto. Timeline of events during the life and reign of the Meiji Emperor. The Meiji era ushered in many far-reaching changes to the ancient feudal society of Japan. A timeline of major events might include November 3, 1852, the Meiji Emperor is born to the imperial concubine Nakayama Yoshiko and Emperor Kome. 1853, a fleet of ships headed by Commodore Matthew Perry arrives in Japan on July 8. Death of the shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu. Appointment of Tokugawa Ieyasu as shogun. 1854–55. Treaties are signed with the United States by the shogunate. Late 1850s, 1860s, the Sono-Joy movement is in full force. 1858, the shogunate signed treaties with the Netherlands, Imperial Russia, and Great Britain. Death of the shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu. Appointment of Tokugawa Ieyasu as shogun. March 1860, the Teruo Inosuke is assassinated in the Sakura Daimon incident. November 11, Sashinomiya is formally proclaimed crown prince and given the personal name Mutsuhito. 1862 Namamugi Incident, 1864–65 Bombardment of Shimonoseki by British, American, French, and Dutch ships. Fighting ensues between the shogunate and Choshu. 1866 Death of the shogun Tokugawa Iemochi. Appointment of Tokugawa Yoshinobu as shogun. January 31, 1867 Death of Emperor Komei from hemorrhagic smallpox. Unofficial accession of Mutsuhito to the throne. January 4, 1868 Formal restoration of imperial rule. End of 265 years of rule by the Tokugawa shogunate. September 12 Formal enthronement of the emperor. October 23 – the era name is changed to Meiji. November 6 – the capital is moved from Kyoto to Edo, renamed Tokyo. November 5, 1872 – the emperor received the Grand Duke Alexei Alexandrovich of Russia. Late 1860s – Manu 1881 – period of rebellion and assassination in Japan. January 11, 1869 – marriage of the emperor to Ishijo Haruko, thenceforth the Empress Shokan. September 4 – the emperor receives the Duke of Edinburgh. 1871 – the abolition of the Han system is proclaimed. 1873 – Edo Castle is destroyed in a conflagration. The emperor moves to the Akasaka Palace. His first children are born, but die at birth. 1877 – the Satsuma Rebellion. 1878 – assassination of Okubo Toshimichi. August 31, 1879 – Prince Yoshihito, the future Emperor Taisho and the emperor's only surviving son, is born. 1881 – received the first state visit of a foreign monarch, King Kalakaua of Hawaii. 1889 – Meiji Constitution promulgated. Ito Hirobumi becomes first Prime Minister of Japan. 1894 – Sino-Japanese War. Japanese victory establishes Japan as a regional power. 1901 – became godfather when Emperor Taisho's son, the future Emperor Showa, was born. 1904–1905 Russo-Japanese War. Japanese victory earns Japan the status of a great power. 1910 – the annexation of Korea by the Empire of Japan. 1912 – the emperor dies. On film, Emperor Meiji is portrayed by Toshiro Mifune in the 1980 Japanese war drama film The Battle of Port Arthur. Directed by Toshio Masuda, the film depicted the siege of Port Arthur during the Russo-Japanese War and starred Tatsuya Nakadai, Tetsuro Tamba and Toshiro Mifune. Emperor Meiji is also portrayed by Nakamura Shishinosuke II in The Last Samurai. Concubines and children. Concubines. Lady Mitsuko. Not much is known about Lady Mitsuko, however she gave birth to the emperor's first son. She died in childbirth. Lady Natsuko. She gave birth to the emperor's first daughter and also died in childbirth. Janagihara Naruko. Natural mother of the Emperor Taisho. Shigusa Kotoko no Sachiko. Children. Titles and styles. November 3, 1852 – November 11, 1860 – His Imperial Highness the Prince Sachi. November 11, 1860 – February 3, 1867 – His Imperial Highness the Crown Prince. February 3, 1867 – July 30, 1912 – His Majesty the Emperor. Posthumous title: His Majesty Emperor Meiji. Honors. National Honors: Grand Cordon and Collar of the Order of the Chrysanthemum. Recipient of the Order of the Rising Sun with Paulownia Flowers. Foreign Honors: United Kingdom, Knight of the Garter. Spain, Knight of the Golden Fleece. Sweden, Knight of the Royal Order of the Seraphim. Greece, Grand Cross of the Order of the Redeemer. Kingdom of Italy, Knight of the Order of the Most Holy Annunciation. Kingdom of Hawaii, recipient of the Royal Order of Kamehameha I. Prussia, recipient of the Order of the Black Eagle. Kingdom of Italy, Knight Grand Cross of the Order of Saints Maurice and Lazarus. Kingdom of Italy, Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Crown of Italy. Thailand, Order of the Royal House of Chakri. Meiji House, part of the house system of Austria. School. Pakistan is named after Emperor Meiji. Issue